All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about really how this world is changing dramatically and how we are actually going back to the time that was before the post-World War II era. And what I mean by that is that people are going back to racism. Racism is becoming popular again. Just a quick little perusing through Twitter/X will demonstrate that. More and more people are finding Darwinism and eugenics to be appealing. And you're seeing this all over the place, especially in the Western world. You're seeing this in the United States. You're seeing this in Canada, Europe. More and more people are getting into this way of thinking. And so what is happening is that a lot of people are thinking, you know what, all this stuff that we were taught as kids, as teenagers, was a bunch of nonsense. And you have more and more people saying that democracy is nonsense and that this supposedly Enlightenment influenced society that we live in is really just a failure. Now, why do they say this? I'm going to get a little bit into the topic of crime here, and I'm going to get a little bit into the topic of dysfunctional behavior and how our refusal to punish acts of lawlessness has really led up to this whole quagmire of a disaster that we are getting ourselves deeper and deeper into. So when you look at America's crime culture and when you look at the justice system that we have, I will say that the justice system in the United States has been to some extent quite terrible. And why do I say this? The reason why I say this is because we do not adequately punish criminals in the United States. We don't. Sure, if someone does a seriously egregious crime like murder, yes, we will put that person in prison for the rest of their lives. We should be giving these people all the death penalty, but we don't. For the most part, we just put them behind bars and leave them there until they're dead. But when it comes to smaller crimes, we are very lenient to a great extent. Now, what do I mean by that? What am I referring to here? What I am referring to is the fact that things like shoplifting, things like robbing people are not treated with the severity that they deserve. So, for example, there is a phenomenon in the United States in which you have criminals who will follow people to their homes and then rob them at gunpoint. So they'll see somebody coming out of a bank and they say, this guy's got money, because why else would he be visiting a bank? And then they will follow this person to their home, and then when the person is at their garage, they'll rob them at gunpoint. And this has happened many times, too many damn times in this country. And so how is this treated? It's not treated with severity, because why are these people in the streets? You can say, well, they haven't been arrested yet. Yeah, but then if you look into the lives of these particular criminals, you will tend to see that these people have been in prison before and they were released. Why are they released? Why are they back on the streets? What's happening here? And the reason why these criminals are allowed to be back on the streets is because we have a very lawless prosecutorial system in the United States. We have prosecutors, we have district attorneys who will give leniency to criminals who deserve no leniency. And so what happens? This sort of criminality is perpetuated, and it just keeps on going. And what you end up with is this sort of culture of criminality that is allowed to fester and is allowed to grow to a very dangerous level. Why is this so dangerous? Well, it's dangerous obviously because it puts people in danger and it strips people of their freedom. You could say, well, how do criminals destroy our freedom? You know, there's this sort of libertarian way of thinking that is quite pervasive in the United States. That says that, you know, the only tyranny can come from the government, and that's just not true. There is, of course, the tyranny of the state or the tyranny of the government, but there is also the tyranny of the mob. And as the French philosopher Joseph de Maistre said, back in the, I think it was back in the 18th century, there is no king more tyrannical than king people, and he was absolutely right. If you cannot leave your home without the risk or without the fear of being robbed and or killed, that is not freedom. You are living under the tyranny of a mob. You are living under the tyranny of criminals. So that sort of tyranny needs to be, of course, purged out. It needs to be gotten rid of through a severe and a just system, or a just imposition on criminals. In other words, we need justice to be imposed on evil people, obviously. As St. Paul said, the law was not made for the just, but for the unjust, and that is why we have laws. The laws are not there to hurt innocent people. The laws are there to punish evildoers, and we're not doing that. And so businesses fail because you have shoplifters, and it's just not good for anyone. It destroys societal trust, and it destroys a society's cohesiveness. Now, the same thing can be said for scammers. We have a big problem in America. Not just America, this also exists in countries like Canada. But we have a big problem with telephone scammers. And what you have is, I hope the wind is not interrupting anything here, but what you have is a bunch of scammers who keep calling people and they try to scam them. So we have a case of thieves and we have a case of scammers, and people are sick of it. So then what happens is that people begin to notice demographics, and they begin to focus on demographics. Now, what am I referring to? What I'm referring to is, well, people will say, okay, when you have shoplifters, which demographic do these shoplifters belong to most of the time? I'm not trying to be racist. This is not me prescribing racism. I'm simply observing a statistical reality. The majority of these shoplifters are members of the African American demographic. Now, people notice this and they say, blacks are thieves and blacks are criminals. And they begin to generalize blacks. And then what happens is you have these eugenists and Darwinists, really Nazis, who come along and they capitalize on this opportunity, and they say, you see, this is why we need eugenics, this is why we need Darwinism, this is why we need to revive Nazism, this is why we should start changing our look on Nazism and on Hitler. Nazism was actually good, and Hitler was good, and the Nazis were the good guys, and we were the bad guys, and this is the sort of ideology that begins to spread, and it spreads because of lawlessness. That's why it spreads, because people look at the lawlessness in society and they say, a lot of these shoplifters, a lot of these criminals are black, so therefore black people are synonymous with criminality, and so I'm going to start going onto YouTube, I'm going to start watching videos on this topic, I'm going to go onto Twitter/X, and they begin to watch racialist content, Nazi content, etc. And thus begins the process of radicalization. This is how it all begins. The source of it is, to a great extent, lawlessness. And by allowing lawlessness, by not punishing criminals, and by not removing criminals from the public, things like racialism begin to become appealing to too many people. And this is how really things like eugenics and racialism are enabled, really empowered to fester in society. And it's very dangerous, it's very disturbing, and it's very scary. Going back to the scammers, people say, okay, out of all these phone scammers, which demographic do they usually belong to? And people begin to notice, wow, the majority of them are coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. They're coming from the Indian subcontinent. So then people begin to make Indian synonymous with scammer. And then people begin to focus on Indians a lot more. And any sort of crime that one Indian may do all of a sudden becomes used as propaganda fodder to perpetuate this idea that Indians are somehow a threat to American or Western society, etc., etc. And that is thus another case of racialism being empowered in society. And what now people are doing is they're saying, wow, back in the 1800s, back in the mid 20th century, racism was very common. Eugenics was a very mainstream idea. And people are beginning to think maybe they had it right. Maybe they were right. And so the whole world is changing. We are going back to that mentality that we thought we had conquered as a result of the Allied victory in World War II. But it's coming back. It's coming back just like that game, Jumanji. There's a movie called Jumanji, and in the movie there's a board game that if you play it, you get cursed. And so what people do in the beginning of the film is they bury it under the ground, and then Robin Williams comes out, and somehow I haven't watched the film in probably almost 2 decades, but from what I remember, the board game gets exhumed and then the curse comes back. It's a little horror movie for kids, but that's what it reminds me of. It's Jumanji. We buried it, and now we are exhuming it. And the reason why exhuming this curse seems so appealing to people is because of lawlessness. Lawlessness leads to tyranny, it leads to racism, it leads to just destruction. Now, here's the thing. Nazism became popular for the very same reason. Nazism wasn't popular right after World War I. I think some people may have this misconception that, there was World War I, and then, Hitler became popular. No, it took quite some time. It took a relatively long time before Nazism became popular. It wasn't right away. And what made Nazism so appealing was the lawlessness that abounded in Weimar Germany. You had degeneracy, you had crime, and a lot of the people who were doing the terrorism in Weimar Germany, because terrorism did become quite common in Weimar Germany, a lot of the people who were doing the terrorism were communists, Bolsheviks. And then people began to notice, well, a lot of these Bolsheviks just so happen to be Jewish. You can look up, for example, Eugene Levine. You can look up Rosa Luxemburg. You can look up a lot of these Bolsheviks in Weimar Germany. And one thing that people noticed was, wow, a lot of them, or a number of them, are actually Jewish. And so they began to make Jew synonymous with Bolshevik or communist. Hitler took advantage of this, and Hitler became very popular. And that led to Germany's demise. So people are really going down the same road. They're spiraling downwards into this very destructive path. And what's so scary is that we can't stop it. The train has been set. We cannot stop it because the left, the liberals, whatever you want to call them, they're still being adamant about being tolerant towards crime, being light on crime. So if the liberals get their way, we're going to have a lack of punishment on criminality, and thus an enabling of further criminality. And as a result, we're going to have more and more people becoming radicalized and going into things like Darwinism, eugenics, Nazism, etc. So it's this circle of destruction that we're going through. It's a circle. It's like if you vote for the liberals, then you're going to have a bunch of crime. And then when you have a crime, then the people turn to more radicalization. And it's just this endless circle. It's really destructive. It really is the case that both of these factions need each other. The right needs the left. They need the left, just like the Nazis needed the Bolsheviks to become popular. The right, the far right, the hardliners, they need the left because the left provides the atmosphere in which things like fascism become popular. And then when the fascists rise up, the left can then use the fascists as great propaganda fodder to say, hey, this is why you guys need us. And it's a circle. It's kind of like the Hamas Likud relationship. The Likudists, the hardliners in Israel, they need Hamas, because as long as Hamas exists and as long as Hamas is firing rockets, people will vote for people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir and Netanyahu and the whole ilk of Talmudic fanatics. And so there's a sort of a mutual relationship there. They need each other, you see. So we're going back, and this whole thing about sending soldiers, military personnel into dangerous cities in the United States, is it a bad idea? Really, in the immediate sense, no, it's not, because there is a very bad crime problem in these cities. Chicago, Houston. Houston is a big crime problem. A lot of the DC, DC is the most violent city in America, and now that you have all these soldiers in DC, crime has gone down tremendously. And what I think could happen is people are going to say, wow, this really works. We should be doing this all throughout the country. And then the lefties, they come along, and what's going to be their response? Their response is going to be, but it's unconstitutional, right? This is not what America is about. America does not allow for military to be used against civilians. And then the other side is going to say, well, who gives a shit? Honestly, that American teaching, that American mentality, be it constitutional or not, is wrong, because it has led us to where we are right now. So they're going to say the whole damn system needs to change. And the idea of militarism in the streets of America could become more and more popular, to the point where it just becomes something very common. Now, is this necessarily a bad thing? No, it's not. This is really how societies have been ran since forever. There's in other countries, it's not uncommon to see soldiers in the streets. When I was in Italy, I saw soldiers in the streets. When I lived in Mexico, I saw soldiers all the time, and it wasn't uncommon to see Mexican federales with machine guns or assault rifles or whatever. When I was in Italy, I saw soldiers all over the place, and they would have machine guns sometimes. In Israel, they have military everywhere. So this is how much of the world is ran, and this is how human societies have been ran since the beginning of time. But in America, we have this idea that using the military on citizens is always bad. And I think what could happen is, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this, but I think one day we're going to see people saying, you know what, who gives a shit? Who cares? If that's the American teaching, you know what, it's a bullshit teaching. It hasn't really led us to anything good. Rescind it. Get rid of it. And we're going to be seeing the total change, the total metamorphosis of the United States and also the world. And I wouldn't be surprised that in the future, we're going to be seeing segregation coming back, because a lot more people are saying that they are fatigued by black people. And there's a lot of posts online showing certain black people acting rowdy in a cruise ship or in a restaurant. And so more and more people are saying, you know what, maybe segregation wasn't so much of a bad idea. Again, what is empowering this way of thinking is lawlessness. Our willingness to tolerate this sort of behavior empowers racism. Because the reality is that the majority of blacks aren't criminals. And if we just cleaned the streets of all criminals, regardless of their demographic, then we can all be happy. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, we can all be happy. If we took out all the white criminals, all the Mexican criminals, all the black criminals, all the Asian criminals, all the Middle Eastern criminals, if we took them all out, take them out of the streets, put them behind bars, or give them the death penalty depending on their crimes, if we got rid of all of these criminals, then black people will feel safe, right? Normal black people who aren't criminals will feel safe. Normal white folks will feel safe. Normal Mexican people, working class Mexican folks, they're going to feel safe, and we're all going to feel safe. And then racism wouldn't have an environment that is conducive for its growth. But what makes racism grow is an environment where it's conducive for its growth. And that type of environment is one of criminality and one of lawlessness. We see the same sort of thing happening in the United Kingdom. So, for example, in the UK, they're still talking about grooming gangs. Why? Because justice wasn't really served in the way that it should have been served. And so for that reason, people in the UK are getting more and more radicalized. There's a lot of radicalization that's happening. And so, for example, there's a video online that's gone viral of a Scottish girl in a place called Dundee, brandishing a knife and an axe, and she's screaming at some non-white individual who's filming her to leave her alone. Or there's actually no, her sister is saying leave her alone, she's just whatever, 12, 13, 14 years old, however old she is. And so people are saying, wow, this girl, she's the face of our cause against mass migration, and they're using her as a symbol. And again, we don't really know the full story of what happened. It could be that she was defending herself. I'm not going to make any conclusion on this story. My whole point is the perception. The perception is this girl who's brandishing an axe and a knife is now a symbol for our movement, which means things like violence at the level of a mob against foreigners is becoming more and more appealing to a lot more people in the United Kingdom. And it's going to grow. And eventually the United Kingdom is going to explode to a very dangerous level. And we saw a bit of that last year, in the summer of last year, wherein we saw mobs of people looting businesses and attacking businesses because the business owners were not white. In one case, it was a Middle Eastern grocery store, and the owner is Middle Eastern, and they trashed his entire shop, and I think they even burned it. And then there was another case, I think in Northern Ireland, wherein a mob of people just sacked a restaurant because it was an Indian restaurant. So it's just, it's horrible, And so when you have this sort of mentality, what happens is the mob will kill people regardless if they're good or bad. They don't care. They'll attack an innocent person's business. They don't give a shit. That's the problem. Now, if you want to go after criminals, if you want the government to become harsher on criminals, that's totally fine. I'm right there with you. The problem is you have these political opportunists, ideological opportunists, who want to murder everybody. They want to murder innocent people. They don't give a shit. And if you're going to say, well, that's because of two-tier policing or because of unfairness towards white people, if you want to have that kind of mentality, then you have become no different from the Israelis who say kill all the Gazans. Because were there crimes done to Jewish people by Hamas? Yes. Were there atrocities done by Hamas on October the 7th? Absolutely. We actually have video of it. And what happened? The Israelis come along and they say, let's kill all the Palestinians. Let's kill all the Gazans. They all deserve death because of what happened on October the 7th. That mentality in Israel is a microcosm for what is flooding the Western world. And that's why I said in one of my last videos, what is happening in Gaza right now is going to be used as an example for genocides in the Western world. This is what I said. Because there are people in the Western world who want to do genocide. Genocide against migrants, genocide against other people, etc. They want to do genocide against foreigners. And so they're going to look to Israel and they're going to say, Israel did it the right way. Let's just do what Israel did. Or we can even be worse than Israel. And if Israel can do it and get away with it, then who the hell is anyone to tell us what to do and to give us moral teachings and moral platitudes. This is the future that we're heading to. You just see it. It's scary, I know, but this is what we're heading towards. We're heading towards a world where we're going to be returning back to how people used to think before the end of World War II, before the post-World War II era. So that's it. It's quite scary. Anyway, I have a dog here. All right, guys, you just heard some theology. God bless.